And let's try and return to my old love, the rat, and see if people have started taking it seriously to prepare for it. Bishop d3. Yeah, I talked about this before. Bishop d3 is not. It's not a bad move at all. Let me try c5. It's the idea of bishop d3 is to. Oh, c3 actually. That could be quite clever. Yeah, let me take on d4. The idea of bishop d3 there is to develop without putting the knight on c3, to play c3 yourself at a later stage, or even c4. So here I've decided to play without bishop g7 for the moment, and I think in the spirit of the rat, I have to play this way. And yeah, normally you would go knight h5 here, bishop g4 to come. I'm thinking h3 then, maybe knight to g7. Try and exchange the bishops with bishop f5. But I'm a little bit worried that it's a bit time consuming. So I'm gonna try and put the knights on a more active square instead. Yeah, castles. I'm not thrilled about this because eventually I think I'll have to trade everything on c3 and then d3, and then my opponent's gonna have a very, very good control over the center. Obviously, the c3 will be a bit of a target for me in the future, but I do think the fact that the whole white structure is so stable, and my king will have some worries here in finding a safe home. I think this means that white has to be somewhat better. I think I'll go h6 now, just to prevent bishop g5, and possibly intending bishop e7, and then start working the king with the via f8 to g7. Don't love it though. Also, whenever I go bishop here, besides the fact that the bishop is not so well placed there, bishop a3 is also a bit of an issue. So all in all, I've got some difficulties here, but I do have some positional trumps in the long run, in terms of better pawn structure on the queen side. But I think for the moment that's a bit of a pipe dream, and I think white is considerably better. But all to play for, of course. h4, it's very logical. Ending both h5 at some point, and also possibly knight h2 to g4. So I'll try to prevent the first of those plans. If h5, for better or worse, I think I just have to take it. Still castle queen side at some moment, so it's not like my king is just stuck to forever being in the center here. Knight a5, at the very least asking some questions, or rather one question, which is to I'm asking him to defend the a4 pawn. The queen c6, now possibly intending rook c8 and then king d7. Yeah, with the bishop to d2, there's not so much point in going rook c8 because that pawn is already protected. So I'll just go knight c4. Now that also knight d2 is no longer an option, trying to trade those knights. And now I'm threatening to go a6 and win that pawn on a4. And since my opponent did not prevent that, that is exactly what I'm going to do. Next, I'll play queen c6 back, and then I'll go b5, possibly later bringing the king to d7. And without that pawn on a4, I think I have a very solid construction over there. Yeah, so you just put me in check, but I think I'll just take it. I'll go queen c6 as planned. Don't see any great threats here. Possibly rook e6. I'll take it. Probably f e6 because queen e6, rook e1 doesn't look too clear. I'll probably take it, yeah, f e6, and then queen g6. I'll go king d8 and hope for the best. Not too clear though. He should try it, because otherwise he could be in a lot of trouble. Yeah, f4 is no good, because it effectively just kills bishop on d2, and he'll probably have to go f5 later on to activate the bishop, which is in a bit of a sorry state at the moment. This could be very clearly one of those cases of good knight versus bad bishop. I'll go b5. Always aesthetical to put all the pawns in the same color complex. And then I'll possibly start rerouting the knight maybe to d6 and then e4, try and gobble up some pawns. Yeah, it should be plain sailing now. Knight e4, and once f6 falls, then I really don't have a lot to worry about. g4, but this is desperation, of course. And I lost some time. Okay, don't know if it was a beautiful game, but certainly an interesting strategic fight there. Fortunately for me, I managed to get the upper hand there eventually. So it's mentioned many times before, you have to be a premium member in order to challenge and to get a game. And also you have to, well, I recommend that you challenge me to 5-minute games if you're slightly lower rated, so that we have more, or rather I have more time to try and instruct and discuss the game. And apart from that, let's play 3 minutes to make it more exciting sporting contest. Okay, so we have Yusuf 4646 from Turkey. Once again, I think a lot of Turkish players here challenging, which is obviously nice to see the interest there. And we have a pretty sharp knight. Or bishop d3, I guess, is a bit unusual. Doesn't look like a bad move though. Okay, let me go e6. The only question is really whether the moves bishop d3 and okay, I'll go b5 as a matter of fact. e5, a4 though? That should be fine. Whether bishop d3 and bishop g5 fit, because one of the moves, bishop d3, really hints at an aggressive setup with later f4, and bishop d3 is more usually in connection with castles and all of that. So now, yeah, with f3 as well, I've played somewhat similar setups with white, so I wouldn't say it's bad at all, but it's obviously not the most challenging in the sense that I can now develop quite freely, especially with with short castle, which is something I generally wouldn't really recommend here, because yeah, there isn't too much pressure on my position, and with short castle, that also means that there won't be any attacking option, which means that black is fine. Seeing as structurally black is doing fine, white usually needs to attack in order to justify his play. So with all that talk, yeah, let's go 95. It seems very reasonable. Putting the knight on a good central square. I think f4 is never really a good idea in connection with kingside castling. So he goes bishop f1 instead, which seems very sensible. Queen b6 now is played just in order to provoke bishop e3. Then I'll go queen c7. I'll claim that it's a slight achievement for me, that yeah, the bishop is a little less active on e3 than it would have been on g5. Don't know if that's anything real though. Knight b3. Don't really know what that all about. Usually in the Sicilian, if you can play d5 with impunity, you should do it. So I'll try and see if it works out well here. There are some tricks though. For instance, my intention was here after a lot of trades in the center, let's say knight d5, bishop d5, bishop f4. The idea was to go queen takes c2 because the knight on b3 will be hanging. What I did miss though is queen takes c2, rook takes c2, and then knight to d4. And this, as far as I can see, leads me to lose a piece. So I have to find something else. But fortunately, bishop d6 seems quite sufficient. And it also introduces a pretty big threat, which is to go knight takes f3, which he incidentally missed. Knight takes f3 and then bishop takes f4. And this will not only net me a pawn, but it will also net me a very strong pair of bishops. And this should mean that his position is kind of collapsing. I don't see any reason not to take another pawn. And obviously now 2 pawns up with all the positional trumps. Should be winning. Yeah, b4. Let's just take it easy. Double the rooks. It's never hurt anyone. And it's really hard to find good advice there for white. I can take another pawn, bishop f3. Yeah, I guess I'll do it. I don't love it, but if I start teaching people not to take completely free pawns, then I'm doing something wrong. And this, after all, is supposed to be educational. Okay, rook d4, yeah. G5 looks too natural not to be played, fortifying that bishop on a nice outpost where it cannot be attacked by any white pawns. And rook d1 is another blunder because of bishop e3. I think I will just go rook c2 as a matter of fact. Could have taken the rook, then rook c1, followed by rook a1, meaning I'll be a full rook up, but I think this is a faster way to the goal. Yeah, rook d3, but that doesn't prevent the main threat, which is rook h2 and mate. Okay, he resigned in time. Okay, not a bad game at all by my opponent. He was just playing a little too passively there and allowing me to build up the pressure. Okay. Let me see. As far as I can see, that's somebody with a picture of me in the profile. As you all know, I'm a sucker for that sort of cheap trick. And so there we go. Have I been black in all the games so far? I think I probably have. Seems a bit unfair, no? Please gives me more opportunities to play the old rat-a-tat-tat. Yeah, with knight f3, these lines are a little less dangerous for black than usual. Doesn't mean that I'm doing well, it just means that the chances of losing in the opening are a little bit smaller. Knight c3. I don't know what's the story here. I guess I could possibly go bishop g7. You constantly have to be worried about h3. Trapping that. And potentially unfortunate forcing on h5, but let's not worry for the moment. Yeah, ed6. I feel like usually you would take back with the queen. Actually castles. I don't know if my opponent realizes, but this is a very clever move. My idea was after d5 to go knight e5, and then after knight e5, bishop e5, bishop h5, gh, queen h5, I might have some counterplay on the g file, or I can at least pretend to. But now if I castle, then d5 comes, and knight e5 is no longer really an option since I've already castled and I cannot use the g file. So either I have to castle d5 and knight b8, which I guess is not completely unreasonable, or I'll have to go d5 myself. Okay, I'll play d5 myself, hoping that the knight will be somewhat misplaced on c3 in this structure, and this will yeah, sort of justify the time that I'm losing. Now I'm expecting queen d2, quite likely, and then I think I'll have to go knight f6, trying to go knight e4. Yeah. Seems like a reasonable course of action. After bishop d3, I have a bit of a difficult choice now. I could go bishop g4, but that seems unpromising due to knight e5. Yeah, okay, so my opponent made it pretty easy for me, because h3 doesn't take into account the main threat that I had, which was to go knight e4. Now I will probably win a pawn, regardless of what happens. Yeah, I'll take on g5 now. Yeah, there is the possibility that I'm not actually winning a pawn. Let me think about this. Knight d4, knight d4, bishop d4, knight d5. And if e6, yeah, there's queen d8 followed by knight e7 and then knight c8, king f8, knight c8, bishop b2, rook b1, b7 hangs. That's unpromising. But I could go bishop d4 immediately though. Knight d4, knight d4. Because the bishop hangs on e2, I think I'm winning the pawn. This is kind of move that's very easy to miss because you really usually don't want to give up that bishop. But for the price of a pretty juicy pawn, I think I'll do it. So here's a little trick as well. Yeah, now after queen d8, I'll take on e2 in between move with check, and I'll force what I thought was pretty favorable simplifications. But now I'm seeing c4. After c4, I'll have to allow cd5 as far as I can see. And the isolated pawn on d5 will mean that I won't have much advantage at all. Fortunately, my opponent went for rook d2, which is not a bad move. It's just that at the present moment, something else was required. Now after c4, I can go bishop c6. Not dc4, rook d1, losing a bishop. But I could go bishop c6, and if rook d1, then I have rook dc8. And I keep the structure intact with a clear advantage. And now I just have a safe extra pawn in the center, which I should be able to convert. Let me just grab a little extra space. I think f4 here is the best chance fighting for some dark squares. Okay, a3, I'll go a5, possibly b4 later on, trying to create a weakness on the queen side. I think especially after c4 here, I'll just go b3, I'll just go b4, and yeah, I'll try and provoke c3, I think, before I go b4. Knight e5, I'll probably just go bishop e8 for the moment. Yeah, knight d4, rook c8. It feels as though my opponent is running a bit out of plans. And yeah, b4 is an idea next, and possibly also e5 at some point. Although I am not going to weaken my structure there very lightly. b3, yeah, I think I'll jump into c3 now that I have the chance, and then go a4. Try and create a weakness that way. Rook c1 is a good move, possibly with the intention of knight to e2 now, kicking the rook away. Okay, sacking the exchange is somewhat tempting, but I don't think that's the proper thing to do. B4, yeah, my opponent is fighting really well. I'll go G5 now. Try and fight for some of those dark squares that I mentioned earlier. I think C3 is likely to happen. Yeah, now I'll go F6, as F4 cannot be played so easily. Next, I want to go E5. Okay, he prevented that by attacking D5. But if I'll get another chance, with the knight in D4, I'm certainly going E5. And then D4, advancing the pawns and cementing the weakness on C2, which I will now immediately gobble up. D3, D2 looks like a lethal threat. D2 and then D1. Okay, very similar to the last game in the sense that my opponent played very decently, just tad too passively. Yeah, another Beatty nickname, obviously. Carlsen's Nightmare. Yet another Turkish player. Good to see. I think after this one, I'll try a couple of 3-minute games. Just want to get a bit warmed up. Knight f6. This is a move that I often see in simultaneous displays, and no, that's not meant as a compliment, unfortunately. So the move is just not very good. It's a bit similar to the Grenfell, but you don't get that weakness on c3 after e4, and this basically means that I will get a pretty free reign in the center. After knight c6, then d5 is also coming, which gives me even more tempo in the center. And I think I'll just continue in the same vein. Try and attack more. a4, and then if a5 as was probably more or less forced, then black will have some issues with the knight on b6. And those squares being a bit weak over there. I think now after ed5, I'll take on b6, try and keep the initiative going, and then bishop e5. This obviously cannot be met by knight c6 because of ed5 with a lethal pin. So bishop d7 is forced, and now after queen d5, I really have a pretty fearsome lead in development. Knight c6, and here I think I'll just try and add as much fuel to the fire as soon as possible. It's queen e7 now. Looks like almost the only move. Knight e5, queen e5, bishop e7 is not possible because of rook d1 with a lethal pin, and if queen e7 instead, I have bishop d7, which means that the king will have to go for a bit of a walk, which walks are generally healthy for you, but I don't think this one is. Rook d1 check, and now I believe king c8 is absolutely forced. King e8, queen b5 will be mate on the next move. I have queen c6. Apart from looking very ugly, at the very least I have queen b5, king c7, then knight d5, winning immediately. So he quite correctly goes king c8, which is the only way to continue the game. And now, yeah, for queen b5, I think queen e6 is the best way to fight. And I have to say, it's not quite over. Queen e6 followed by bishop c5. You can certainly put up a lot of resistance. More than I'm 100% comfortable with. Like, thought this would be close to over, but maybe I actually rushed it. I was just thinking development advantage and all of the positional trumps that I have, but the bishop on c5 is really, really good. This means that the advantage that I have is somewhat limited. So now I'm trying to reroute my pieces a bit. King b8 now, trying to escape with the king. I'm going to go queen d3 with a few ideas. One which is to go queen to g3 with a nasty check. But the other one, just as important, is to go knight to b5 once the king comes to a7 to force it back. And this means that he probably cannot survive for very long after all. Knight is going to b5, then the rook to d1, creating a nasty threat of rook to d8 as well. So maybe there is some sense, there is some logic in the world after all. Okay, I'll go rook d1 first, maybe, just to make sure rook d8 doesn't happen. And after king b8, knight b5 looks very, very strong. Yeah, my opponent has fought really well after an initial bad opening, but I think there's just nothing here. Too many weakness. Like if you put the black king on g8 and the rook on f8, then he's only a little bit worse. But yeah, but the king as it is just hopeless. Rook c8. And now we're gonna see a very quick mate, I believe. Queen c7 is probably the only way to prolong it a bit. But obviously, no one's gonna want to do that game now. Serious opponent. So we got ourselves an FM. I feel like I played Raffaello before, but apparently I haven't. Anyway, regardless of whether I played Raffaello before, he's going to get treated to the rat. Didn't accept the rat, which means we have the quasi rat or accelerated rat or whatever the cool kids call it. Anyway, this I feel like is sort of the best case scenario you can get in this opening, because this is, I think, very much a playable French type of position. Doesn't mean that I'm better or anything close to it. It just means that I shouldn't complain by any means. So queen a5, I'm trying to pose some questions early on. But I am a bit of a chicken, so I think I'll just pose them and then close them, as they say. After all, with the structure that we have, it seems very reasonable for me to want a closed structure. Okay, bishop h6 is a bit nasty. Exploiting the fact that I'm not going to want a repetition. So what I'll do is I'll repeat once and then I'll do something else. h6 looks a bit stupid, but I do have the option of playing bishop e7 next. And this should mean that I'm doing fine. just fine. Once he has to exchange on e7, then positionally in the long term, I'm doing okay. And even though my active prospects aren't too great here, my position is so solid that I should be fine. And also his bishop doesn't really have a lot of prospects here. Like he would love to have a dark squared bishop in order to attack the very squares that he's trying to attack with the queen now. But without that dark square bishops, I just don't think it's very effective. I don't really think white is worse, but I'm certainly quite comfortable. Yeah, it feels like sooner or later I should have to open up the queen side here. So I'll try and do that. I'll actually do it sooner rather than later. A6, that means that... Oh, what did I think? I thought rook c5 was forced to protect the pawn, but obviously this is much better. Yeah, that was a miss. That was pretty unnecessary, I have to say. Okay. Don't think you should be doing this, sir. Don't think his position was ready for that opening. Because h3, I would have grabbed the h-file, and I just don't think there are enough pieces for him to attack with. Okay, this one I'll grab. Can't say I'm a famous pawn grabber, but I still like to grab him once in a while. Knight d8. Just trying to consolidate. Blundering a6. Obviously. Yeah, it was unfortunate. Really unfortunate. Oh, knight b7 blunders to queen f6. Yeah, that was really bad. I'll go knight c6 then. Yeah, rook b6. I was trying to bait him to go queen f6 there, but he didn't take said bait. Okay. Now I have to both play quicker and to play better, which is a bit of a tall task. Tall task and a big ask. Okay, we'll push this one forward. Should not have allowed rook a7. Damn it. That was really stupid. Really not very clever at all. Okay, I'll exchange the queens. We'll have the chance. Try and reroute the knight. Obviously, I need to play a lot faster. Okay. Try and go for a rook attack here. Fork, please blunder. Yes. Now I have a chance. No, I forgot to take the rook. Damn it. And we have a loss. Oops. That wasn't good. That wasn't good at all. How did I forget to take the rook first? It's just not used to playing fast. I have to say good game by my opponent though. Played fast and avoided blundering for the most part, and very solid mostly. But yeah, I should do better. Okay. Let's try and find another 3-minute game. Okay. Don't